Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my Sims 4 speedrunning video, or welcome to the channel if you are new here. So in today's video I'm going to be building the world of Mount Komorebi, which is the world that we got from the expansion pack of Sims 4 Snowy Escape, and I'm going to be building a Japanese pottery store and studio, but it also is a family home. So this house ends up having 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and it's built on a 20 by 15 lot. The way that I built and structured this house, by the way, we have almost like a little pottery section, pottery studio in the back garden. I was personally imagining it to be kind of like a pottery shed, but then in the actual main house itself, I had the idea of the Sims that live in this house. It used to be like a regular family home and they used to just have their pottery studio in the garden, but they kind of got a lot of sales from all the different pottery that they were producing, and so they decided to pretty much convert what used to be the initial entrance, the initial hallway and lounge room of their home into now kind of like a little retail section. Now I love this idea for kind of like a half family home, half small business so much, and I do want to mention quite early on that this whole entire build, this whole entire video was inspired by one of you lovely lot. So a few weeks ago I received a comment on honestly one of my earlier businesses and hobbies videos, because since the businesses and hobbies EP has been out, honestly I've just been building so many different small businesses left, right and centre, but it was on one of my first ones that I did, and someone commented that they had this idea for me to build a kind of like a Japanese pottery store in the world of Mount Komorebi, and it kind of focuses on kintsugi, which if you're unfamiliar with what that is, I will get on shortly and tell you a little bit more about it. But when I saw this idea, I just thought that this was the smartest idea to kind of incorporate this new pottery hobby that we've got from the Businesses and Hobbies EP, which by default is kind of just, it's in the world of Nordhaven, and I kind of want to branch out and make it so, you know, different areas have pottery, different areas have tattoo parlours that also come in that expansion pack. I feel like San Myshuno would be a really good place to have a little tattoo parlour or something, but yeah, when I saw this idea, when I saw this comment, I just noted it down straight away, and this week I finally sat down and built it. Thank you so much, by the way, if it was you that commented this, and you also said something along the lines of, if it's okay that you've got this build idea, honestly they're more than welcome. Like if anyone's got any suggestions for me, I would love to hear them. But yeah, this week I sat down and I tried to make it a little bit more traditional on the inside, little pottery studio and family home, and yeah, I really like it, and so really hope you like it as well. But anyway, moving on from that and actually getting on and talking a little bit more about the build itself and also what I'm doing right now. So as you can see, I've already figured out the main shell, the main structure for this build. I'm just currently coming in and figuring out the floor plan, which this floor plan was a little bit tricky, I'm not going to lie to you, because I needed to figure out, alright, where's going to be like the only bits? Where's going to be the kitchen? Where's going to be the lounge and the dining room? But then also where's going to be the store and, you know, the other bedrooms and the bathroom and stuff. And so the floor plan, I feel like it looks really quick, but it did actually take me some time, not going to lie to you. There does end up being a bedroom in the basement, which you can see me doing right over here, which the bedroom in the basement is for a teenager. And by the way, this house is for my so far, and so I have got a little bit of an in-depth storyline to kind of run alongside, not only with the build, but then just like little bits and bobs about it. But I'll get on and tell you a little bit more about that shortly. But in terms of the actual structure for this build, I was looking at a picture that I found on Pinterest. I'll find the picture for you and I'll pop up on the screen right now so you can have a little look. I think the house is originally from an anime series. I'm not sure which one. I've never watched an anime, but the house is beautiful. It's really cutesy, and it just looks like one of them. It kind of looks like a painting, if you know what I mean. Like, it's just so beautiful, this house. But I saw this on Pinterest and I knew that I wanted to recreate it, but make it a little bit more traditional looking, because the thing is, the house itself, if you actually look at it, it seems to be a little bit more towards the modern side of things. And where I'm building in the world of Mount Komorebi, this is kind of like, in my head, like rural Japanese area, and so I tried to basically just change the wallpaper and make it feel a little bit more like it was older than what the reference image was looking like. Now, like I said, this whole build was inspired by a comment from one of you lovely lot, and I think the original commenter had the idea to build kind of in like the more city area of Mount Komorebi, because if you're not aware, the world itself is kind of split off into 3 sections. We've got the snowy part, where your Sims can go snowboarding, they can go skiing. There's snow 24/7 there. You're never going to see, you know, the grass on the floor. It's consistent snow. But then there is also kind of like the city part, I'm doing quotation marks because the Sims team didn't really make it into a city, but it's the most city-like area. And then there is also this section, which I believe is meant to be the more modernised area of the world. But to me, in my head, I just love the idea of, for my save file, having kind of like a little Japanese countryside section. And so for my save, I decided to, just basically make this section into that. Now, when it came around to actually figuring out where I was going to build this house, initially I wanted to kind of build it in the city because I think the original idea, like from the person, that was kind of like the idea in their head. But the thing is, for my save file, in like the main city section of the world, I've only got one build left to do, and it's on, the park lot. It's like the 30 by 20, but it's quite an important one because I believe when you go to a certain festival in the game, your Sims by default will always automatically load in there. And so I think I'm going to build potentially a park there because I think off memory that's what it was before. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with it, but basically when it came around to building this and figuring out where I was going to place it, I just didn't have any room to build it in the city if I wanted to include it in my save file. And I just loved this idea so much. And so I thought, you know what, actually, having like a little Japanese pottery store in the Japanese countryside, beautiful, that's a lovely idea. And so, I decided to build it in kind of like the more, in my head, rural section of the world. Now, where this build is going to be for my save file, I have got a storyline for the Sims that live here, which I will get on and tell you about in a minute. But I was also thinking about the other gameplay for this build outside of like the initial household that lives here, because I was thinking, well, it's a small business venue, it's like a nice little pottery studio in the Japanese countryside. I was trying to think of like different ideas for gameplay for Sims outside the household, and I came to the idea of, sometimes when people go travelling, bear with me, but sometimes when people go travelling and you can, you hear stories of there's like this really little old lovely lady in the mountains and she gives like traditional stick and poke tattoos. I really hope you know what I'm talking about here. But basically, I had this idea of, well, what about if when your Sims are in uni or if your Sims are in school and stuff, they hear and maybe even learn in school about this pottery studio and this little pottery section in the countryside in rural Mount Komorebi, and it's kind of like one of the oldest pottery people in the world or something, and maybe Sims from all over will kind of travel here to get either a piece of pottery, just right off a shelf, or maybe even potentially take a class. Really hope you kind of get the idea that I'm trying to bring across to you. But I just basically had this idea in my head that this little pottery studio, the Sims that are like the owners, they didn't invent pottery, but I imagine probably their ancestors or someone along their family tree somewhere might have had some sort of influence on how pottery is today. And so if Sims want to, they can visit the world of Mount Komorebi and they can take the most authentic pottery class available to them. And they do it in kind of like this house's little garden shed. I love this idea. I think it's so fun for gameplay, but then it also gives your Sims a little bit of an initiative to actually actively go through a loading screen and visit this area. Like I said, it is also a family home, so a family do still live here, but the idea that I had for it was, maybe their ancestors used to really be into pottery, and so they only had maybe to start off with their little garden shed, but they realised from all the different tourists, all the different travellers coming from God knows where, that they wanted to buy all this pottery, that they would convert a little section of their house and make it into the store. Now, with the new pottery feature, we got, I want to say kind of like an element to it. It's not fully fleshed out by any standard, but we got this little like chapter onto the pottery skill, which is something called Kitsugi. Really hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm really sorry if I butchered that. But pretty much from my understanding, it means golden repair or join in with gold. And apparently it's meant to be this Japanese art form that repairs broken pottery. But normally, say for example, you're in your kitchen, you're unloading your dishwasher, and you accidentally drop a plate or you drop a mug or something, and it will just normally shatter. If you try and put it back together with super glue, you're going to see the cracks, and sometimes they're not the most attractive thing. Well, apparently, Kitsugi is basically highlighting the imperfections, but when they kind of like stick all the stuff back together, they purposely make it visible. From my understanding, it kind of transforms the original piece, which would have been lovely anyway, but it kind of transforms it so the broken piece of pottery, whether it be a bowl, a glass, a vase, I don't know what it's going to be, but once it's been cracked and then it's been glued together, with highlighting it in like a gold or a silver, it then kind of like shows the imperfections of it and kind of like the history of the piece, and that's really beautiful. I think honestly I didn't know about this method of katsuki until this expansion pack came out, and now I've looked into it. Yeah, I just think that's really lovely. And so I was thinking for this build, well, maybe the Sims that own the pottery studio and the house, maybe their method is like the oldest method, and your Sims, like I said, they can go to other worlds and they can get a pottery class taught to them in Nordhaven or wherever. But if they want like the real authentic experience, they can travel here. And maybe this Sims family's method of kitsugi is a little bit different to everyone else. Maybe they use like certain materials or something. I just thought it was a really lovely idea. But either way, moving over and actually getting back and talking about what I'm doing right now, as you can see, I've now already moved in to the furnishing. I'm currently just coming in and cluttering up these shelving units. Now for this build, I decided to start off the furnishing with the pottery studio. That is currently where I am. And so if your Sims are deciding to maybe take a week-long trip or maybe just a weekend trip to the world of Mount Komorebi and they want to experience, getting their hands filled up with all this like authentic clay and, have the real authentic pottery experience, this is where your Sims will come and get a lesson. In here, I will say, it does end up being quite small and there is only 2 pottery wheels and 1 kiln. But to be honest, I actually kind of liked it because in my head, I'm thinking your Sims are travelling from God knows where. They've travelled this whole entire distance to come and have this lesson, where there is only going to be another one other Sim having this lesson with them. It feels a little bit more intimate. I can't think of another word, and that's a really weird word to use, but do you know what I mean? Like, it feels a little bit more like you're going to get a better experience where there's fewer people being taught the same thing. Now, something that I want to mention whilst I'm furnishing this section of the build, you might have noticed, and I've already spoke over it, so I'm mentioning it now, but basically, when it came round to actually furnishing the start of this room, you might have noticed I pulled out a series of different rooms that I'd already pre-made different pottery, and I was attempting to come and put it into this little, like, pottery studio. Now, unfortunately, and honestly, it's so irritating. It's funny, but it's also a little bit irritating. Basically, with this new kitsugi skill, this is something, like I said, is a little bit of a feature-ish in the game. It's not fully fleshed out, but it's a little bit of like an added element to the pottery system. Your Sims in the game, they can have a broken piece of pottery and they can mend it themselves, and they can visibly show from the pottery that they've made that, they made this by hand. It might have broke at one point and they've glued it back together. And when they glaze it, it has all these different beautiful, almost like veins in the pottery. I spent a decent amount of time, don't even know how long, but basically getting my playtester Sim to make so many different things with the pottery skill, purposely breaking them, mending them back together and glazing them. So I had loads of different, basically varieties of this broken katsugi pottery. When it came round to actually furnishing, I then realised that for some reason, when you save a build either to the gallery or just even to your library, the cracks in the pottery for some reason don't transfer over. Now the thing is, you would have seen this beautiful cracked pottery of like gold little like veins inside of it if I would have got my playtester Sim to make the pottery in this save. But the thing is, when I was building this, for some reason I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it in this save file, and I got another Sim who is actually the same Sim that is the one that playtested this build, but it's just a previous version of her. But I got her to make it in a separate save file, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to get her to have a club. I'm going to get all these Sims to come and, they can make pottery, basically be like the pottery machines for me. That ended up didn't working out because my Sims couldn't actually save the pottery themselves because she didn't own it or something silly like that. And so in the end, it was just my Sim, a single woman. She was doing all the hard graft. She was doing all the hard work. And then I was like, I'll just pop them into a little saved room in my library. When I move over to the save file that I actually built the house in, I can just pop them in, lovely jubbly, and no. Honestly, it was so irritating. It's funny to look back on, but I thought I'd let you know that just as kind of like a heads up, if you want to put it that way. For some reason, cracked pottery doesn't transfer over through saved rooms or rooms on the library. So yeah, if you actually want to have the cracked pottery in your game, you've actually got to get your Sims to actually do it yourself. Your Sims have actually got to work to make that pottery and then also purposely break it to see the effect. But I mean, at least it gives your Sims an initiative to actually venture out into that feature of the expansion pack if you look at the brighter side of things. But either way, moving over, as you would have seen, I finished up the little pottery studio. There was also one whiteboard in there, so like I said, there's 2 pottery wheels, 1 kiln, and then 1 whiteboard. And now I moved over into the little like store section where I imagine after a few years, the Sims family that live and own this house, they realised that people were coming from all over to experience their pottery lessons and, you know, get taught this traditional method. But people also wanted to buy a lot of pottery. And so I imagine that this room that I'm currently cluttering used to be like their hallway, but then also their lounge seating room kind of situation. But over time, they thought, do you know what, we're going to basically monetize this, and they decided to transform it into kind of like a little shopping section. In here I placed down once again a lot of like bowls, vases, lots of different pottery bits and bobs. And then also in the corner I just placed down a little rusty chair. I was basically thinking, and I don't know if you can see it, but ever so slightly underneath that chair there is a watering can, and if you look very closely at the chair that I've placed down, it looks like it's got some sort of rust on it. But then also above the chair I placed down some hanging plants. I was thinking over the years the Sims that live in this house will tend to their little plants, you know, they'd water them every single day, but then all the drips from the water that they've just watered their plants with would kind of go down onto the chair below it, and it's kind of like rusted over time. It's honestly, it's such a small thing, but it was just something that I was thinking of when I was building, so I just thought I'd mention it. But also in this room as well, I placed down a few different shelving units. The ones that I've used in here, the one that's on the opposite side of the wall, that is from Snowy Escape, and I just came in and just cluttered it with, you know, random bowls, random vases and stuff. And then these 2 over here, these are from the Crystal Creation Stuff pack, and initially I loved the idea of using them because if you actually look at them, there's like some detailing on like the top portion, and it looks quite traditional to me. And also like the little glass doors that open the cabinets up, that looks quite traditional. But then as I carried on throughout this room and I was, you know, adding little knickknacks here and there, I then just basically decided that I didn't like them and I wanted a change of shelving unit, and so I ended up opting for the ones that we got from the Jungle Adventure game pack in the end. But yeah, over here I've got this little side table which I was making into a bit of a pretend desk section. Now, like I said, I am building this for my save file, and I have got a storyline in mind for the Sims that are going to be living in this house in my save. And I was personally picturing that the Sim that was sitting here was a little old lady, and the Sim that runs the pottery studio and actually teaches the class is her husband. Now, the idea that I had for these 2 was this couple have been together for donkey's years, like literally met when they were in high school or something, probably like high school sweethearts. They fell in love, and shortly after they graduated they got married, they started a family, they had a few different children who over the years, you know, they grew up and they moved out and they went and got their own careers and they got relationships and they even started a family. And for a while it was just this little elderly couple. I was personally picturing, I was saying about the history of the pottery and the katsugi and stuff, I imagine it stemmed from the husband's side of the family, and so that is why he more so teaches the pottery, and then his wife kind of like manages the storefront kind of situation. But I was personally picturing that, yeah, they lived together for years, just having their little pottery store, happy as Larry, and then one day their grandson moved in with them. Now, I was thinking that their grandson was also from the world of Mount Komorebi, but he probably used to live in the more like city section of the world. And then basically, unfortunately, he's got a little bit of a tragic backstory. His family passed away, or his mum passed away. I was thinking he came from a single mum household anyway. I imagine that his mum was the daughter of the couple that owned the pottery studio, but she might have had, maybe she went to a bar one night, and maybe she had a one night stand, something along the lines of that. Maybe the dad one day decided that he didn't want to do it anymore. I just imagine that from a young age it was always him and his mum, but then somewhere along the lines, and I'm still in 2 minds about what I want to do with it, but his mum passed away. The reason why I'm in 2 minds is because one of the ideas that I had, and you'll see it when I decorate his bedroom, but one of the ideas that I had was maybe she passed away in a really tragic skiing or snowboarding accident. And so for a short like 20 seconds when I'm decorating his bedroom, you'll see I do attempt to place down like snowboards and skis, and then the idea was place them down and then put cobwebs over it. You know, he's a bit scared himself now to touch them. That was my initial idea, but then when I actually started thinking more about his mum's passing, that sounds really tragic, doesn't it? But when I started thinking a little bit more about it, I then remembered that I don't even think your Sims can actually actively pass away due to a ski or snowboard incident. I mean, they might, but I mean, maybe my Sims have just been really lucky, but I don't think that is the case. And in my save file, because there's going to be a few dead Sims, not going to lie to you, there, a couple of them are plot their clogs. I want you to be able to go onto the family tree and highlight a Sim and see the cause of death. And so if I'm saying that she passed away from a ski or snowboarding accident, and then in reality it's something like she died in a house fire, I don't know if it makes the most sense, but maybe I might just do it anyway, just for like storytelling purposes, because I did also like the idea that the teenage boy was really into skiing and snowboarding, but then his mum passed away and he got a little bit scared about going near a pair of skis again. I'm just not too sure what I want to do with it, but I did also have another idea of maybe she passed away because she had a really bad serving of, and I always really struggle to pronounce this, but pufferfish nigiri. I butchered that, and I basically, with the City Living expansion pack, there is a dish that your Sims can eat, and basically if they eat it and it's excellent quality, lovely, nice and yummy, but if they get a bad quality, your Sims will die from eating this food. And so maybe one night him and his mum went out to a restaurant, maybe in the city, and maybe she had a bad serving, maybe the chef was on his first time doing the job and served it really bad quality, and maybe she pops her clogs that way. I'm not too sure. I'm still in two minds with what I want to do with it. But yeah, I was thinking that this teenage boy, his mum passed away, and he does have maybe like uncles and maybe like another auntie or something that he could have moved in with, but it just made the more sense for him to move in with his grandparents. And so now he lives with them, and he just so happens to live in the basement. In my head, the basement, you will see it in a second, currently just decorating like the little dining room section, but in my head, the basement used to be like the storage room for extra bits of pottery and stuff, but we'll get on to that when we get onto that. Either way, moving over and actually getting back and talking about what I'm doing right now. As you can see, I've now started coming in and decorating like the actual living section of this house. So where I basically took the first chunk of the actual family home and transformed it into kind of like a little retail section, when it came around to actually figuring out the layout of the rest of the house, it's very small and squished, but in a way I kind of like it, because in my head it makes it feel a little bit more kind of authentic. This family, they realised that they could make some more money by selling pottery instead of just cramming it all into the little pottery shed in the garden. Why not make what used to be their living room into the pottery section? And then over here in this section, what I'm currently cluttering up, I was thinking maybe used to be just like a nice little seating area or something. The kitchen, I imagine the kitchen was always the kitchen, because I mean in reality, if we're thinking about it realistically, you can't just like pick up your kitchen counters and your fridge and your sink and all the pipes that go along with it and just move it to a different section of the house. And so the kitchen, it ends up being quite decent size, but yeah, I imagine that was always the kitchen. And then maybe outside where I placed down the little dining room table, that was probably always where the dining room table was, or maybe this section was, I'm not too sure. But I just tried to make it feel very cozy and lived in this house. Like I said, I tried to decorate it to be a little bit more traditional on the interior. I'm very much aware that on the exterior, the actual look of the house is quite modern, where I was basing it off that anime picture. But yeah, on the inside, I really wanted it to feel like a little traditional Japanese house in the countryside. But over here, for the little like seating TV area, I decided to use a love seat and matching armchair, which are from the Laundry Day stuff pack. Do you know what? I rarely ever use the love seat version of that sofa. I sometimes use the armchair, but the only time I really use the armchair is when I size it down and make like a makeshift plant pot out of it. Because with the armchair that I've used, I know it sounds really weird, but basically if you get 4 of them, size them down really small and then cover them over a plant, you can make it look like the plant is in some sort of like wicker plant pot. I do that more often than I actually use the armchair to be for what it actually is. But in this little section, there is a tiny little dining table, and then there is also a few different like boxes and puzzles kind of like shoved behind the sofa. But now moving on, over in this little section, this is how you get down into the basement. Now, like I said, I imagine originally before this couple's grandson moved in, the little basement section of this house was, like a little storage section. They used to keep maybe old bits of pottery. Maybe they used to have like an old wheel down there. Maybe they used to have like random knickknacks in their basement. But then when their grandson moved in, they kind of needed to makeshift that section and make it into a bit of a bedroom for him. I tried to still make it feel like it was a bedroom in a basement, but over time they've added like little bits and bobs to make it feel a little bit more homey. But in the basement itself, I was debating, and I was very close to making it so there was going to be a second bathroom down here. But then I was thinking, well, for realism purposes, if this did just used to be a 1-bed, 1-bathroom house, why would there be a second bathroom in the basement? And so you would have seen, I decided to make that little separate room into basically like a utility room or like a little laundry room section. If you want to, honestly, feel free to transform that room into a second bathroom for gameplay, because truth be told, I know it would be more ideal if that was a bathroom. You could definitely just shove a shower or maybe even just pop a toilet in replacement for the washing machine and the tumble dryer. But yeah, in my mind, it just made more sense to make it so that's where the family come downstairs and put a load of washing on. But also outside the bedroom, I placed down like some shelving units that I imagine probably used to be in the actual basement, which you can see that I've now moved on, and I've started decorating this teenager's bedroom. So in here, I went for like a wooden wallpaper, and then I purposely made it so there was some like beams with some spandrels. Just made it feel a little bit more basement-y in a way. Now, the idea that I also had for this sim was this teenage boy, he's a little bit troubled, His mum passed away quite tragically, whether it be from a really bad serving of food, whether it be from a house fire, or whether it be from a really bad skiing or snowball next to him. His mum, she had a tragic loss to her life. She popped her clogs. And so I was thinking that he's quite troubled and he's also a little bit naughty, but he's also a really good artist. And so in his room, I dotted about a few different sketches, some that we got from the high school years expansion pack, they're on the opposite wall, but over here, kind of like merged in between what looks to be a map. Them sketches are from the Artist Studio Kit, and they're beautiful. And there's one picture of, it looks to be a lady, Sim, on the wall, and I was thinking, that's his high school crush. Now, in my save file already, one of the neighbouring lots to this one, the Jessicapie family, really hope I'm pronouncing that. Also, sorry, interrupting myself. This is where I was thinking about the skiing and snowboard next thing. You can see I'm putting out skis and snowboards here, and I pulled them out, and it was a very short-lived thing because I was thinking this is going to look so strange. But either way, going back to my save file. Yeah, so I've got this family in my save called the Jessicapie family, and they're a pre-existing family that live in the world of Mount Komorebi. And it's already actually kind of like a similar storyline. It is 2 grandparents, and they live with their teenage granddaughter. And the granddaughter, I was thinking, could potentially be the Sim in that painting. I just like the idea because she is this family's neighbour, if you want to put it that way. I imagine that the Sims in my save file, they're going to know their neighbours. They're going to be friendly or have some sort of relationship, whether it be positive or negative, depending on the Sim and, like their character values and stuff. But my Sims in my save file, they're going to know each other. And I was thinking, well, there is a teenage granddaughter that also lives next door, similar age range. Maybe this teenage boy really fancies her, but maybe hasn't got the courage to speak to her, because I'm pretty sure, off memory, one of the ideas that I've got for her already in my save file is she actually fancies someone else in my save who is from a very rich family. And so maybe it's like a love triangle. Yeah, maybe it's a love triangle, and maybe he doesn't want to interrupt it because there is this really, quite in my eyes, posh boy that comes from a family from a lot of money, and maybe she has something going on with him, but then this teenage boy has maybe maybe like a year ago moved to town, and he is getting to know the neighbours, he's getting to know his schoolmates. Maybe he's developed a crush, but maybe he hasn't got the nerve to actually talk to her, and maybe he just draws pictures of her in his basement. That sounds really strange, doesn't it? To be honest with you, the reason why my mum went there is because this teenager that lives next door, she also lives with her grandparents. She's around a similar age range, and so I feel like these two would just have, something to talk about. I'm pretty sure, also got a little bit of a tragic backstory. I'm pretty sure her, mum and dad passed away, and that's why she lives with her grandparents, and so maybe it's something that eventually they could bond over. I imagine that this boy that sleeps in this room is quite naughty. He's very good at art, but he is quite naughty. And so I imagine that maybe one day when he's actually eventually allowed back in school, because he probably gets expelled quite a lot for skipping or bunking his lessons off or something, maybe one day he gets up the urge to talk to her, and maybe they end up going to prom together, or just something lovely like that. But yeah, I really like the idea of him having a little bit of a crush, and he expresses himself through his drawings. But I did also pop one of them drawing tablets in his room as well. Didn't really have the appropriate space to place down an art easel, but in both the Sims 4 base game and then also I think from the Artist Studio Kit, we got a drawing tablet, which honestly is pretty much the exact same thing as an art easel. It's just much smaller and your Sims can do it sitting down. And so I did place that down onto kind of like his little computer desk area. I did also place down a radio station in his bedroom alongside with a guitar, so maybe he's also really into music. Maybe he just listens to music whilst he does all these drawings. But either way, moving over, as you can see, I've now moved on to the next section of his house, and we've actually now moved on to the upstairs portion, and I'm currently coming in and decorating the hallway. So over here, I just placed down a nice little side table. I also popped down, eventually, a litter box, because when I was decorating the kitchen, I liked the idea of maybe this household having a little cat. And so I did place down a food bowl into the kitchen, but then at one point in the next minute or so, I remembered that the cat might need a wee. And so I do end up placing down a litter box into the upstairs hallway. Probably not the most hygienic, but at least it's not outside by the pottery wheels or something. But over here, as you can see, I'm now coming in and decorating the bathroom. Bathroom's very short and sweet. There's honestly just a little toilet, a sink, and then a shower and bath combo. Normally in this situation, I'd prefer to go for more like a shower, because where the bathroom is so small. But then I was thinking, this couple, they're elderly, and bless their heart, I don't want them standing up in the shower, because with elders in the game, if you get them to do too much activity, dangerous territory. So I thought, you know, I'm going to opt for a little shower and bath combo. That way, get the best of both worlds. Maybe the teenage boy could have a shower and then the grandparents could have a bath or something. But now moving on into the last room, which is the grandparents' bedroom. In here, I debated on a while which bed I wanted to go for. The one that I've placed down now, I do debate the colour swatches of this one a little bit. In the end, I do delete it, but this is initially from the Life and Death expansion pack. It looked quite traditional. I just felt like it belonged in a grandparent's bedroom, but at some point I decided I just didn't like it. So I did decide to change it out to be one that we got from the Cottage Living expansion pack. But also in this room as well, I placed down a little chest of drawers in the corner. I ended up placing down some like little books and vase decorations and a random sculpture of a few birds That's from the Lovestruck expansion pack, by the way. I always forget that is in the game, and it comes in some lovely swatches. It's like a parrot swatch and stuff, but I decided to go for quite a boring swatch. But other than that, I'm going to go around this build, finish it off and make some final touches, and that is pretty much it. So anyway, guys, I'm going to end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My gallery ID is JessicapieYT, or you can just search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content, then please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speedrunning video. Bye guys.